Hello. This is Jonathan, and you're listening to the Johnny Talks podcast, the place where we help you achieve your financial goals. Hola, amigos. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. And if you're a new listener to the show, special warm welcome to you. I really appreciate you tuning into the show. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. I appreciate it even more. In today's episode, we will speak to my friend Chris Mamula from Can I Retire Yet? Chris is a physical therapist who retired at the young age of 41. Yes, that is indeed about 25 years before the traditional age for retirement. But contrary to popular belief, this does not mean that he lived a life of deprivation in order to save and invest aggressively. Chris will share his unconventional journey to this early retirement, the excellent financial decisions he made along the way, but as well the serious mistakes, so you can avoid them as well. This conversation is meant to show you one way of achieving financial independence. It may not be your ideal path, but it's important to show you what is possible. This episode is for you if you're curious about financial independence/early retirement and want to know what it takes to achieve it. So without further ado, let's hear the interview. Hello, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's great to talk to you.
Yes, great to have you on, and I'm excited to speak to you. We will speak about how you retired at age 41, and you made quite some unconventional choices during your life, and this has led you to achieve this early retirement. And of course, I'm interested in how you achieved it, where all the inspiration come from. But maybe before we dive into the topic, can you give us a little introduction of yourself, Chris?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Mamula. I write the blog Can I Retire Yet? And I kind of just chronicle my journey to early retirement and now kind of the highlights and the struggles now that we're in early retirement. My background, I was a physical therapist, so made an above average salary, but never huge money. And my wife had a career with very parallel earnings throughout. And so again, kind of the same thing, like we had a 2-income household, but never any huge incomes. And so we did it with relative frugality, as well as growing our incomes over time. And but yeah, we kind of lived a pretty enjoyable life on the path. And once we retired, we moved from Pennsylvania in the eastern part of the United States to Utah to live in the mountains. We're big outdoors people. And so now life kind of focuses around being primarily a stay-at-home dad and a ski bum in the winter and a climbing, hiking, mountain biking bum in the summer. And so life is good.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I'm excited to hear how you achieved that, because it's quite it's quite a young age to be retired. When you think about it, Chris, here in Europe, I think the ages vary between 65, 67, maybe 62 in some countries. What's the retirement age in the US? 65 or something as well?
Yeah, I mean, you can start. So Social Security is the public government program that replaces income in retirement, and you can start claiming it as early as 62 or as late as 70. Yeah. And the vast majority of the population really relies on that program and has very little savings. So yeah, our lifestyle was pretty unconventional to do what we did.
Yes, indeed. I mean, you basically shortcut retirement by 20 years, even more, 20, 25 years. So yes, when did you start thinking, hey, I want to retire early? I mean, what comes to mind? I mean, I know it's broad, but what comes to mind what sparked this journey, actually?
Yeah, so I mean, looking back now, a lot of what I write about is honestly kind of revisionist history and putting the story back together because there was no master plan. What I write about now is kind of referred to as FIRE, financial independence, retire early. That it wasn't a thing back then. The internet was barely a thing back then to find these stories. And honestly, like, even if I heard them, I would kind of be skeptical, because I didn't think normal people like with normal jobs like us could retire. I mean, I thought early retirement was maybe 58, 60, something like that. Yeah. So it basically started for us with security. My wife grew up without having a whole lot of financial security her whole childhood. And I grew up in a house where my mom was really good at stretching a dollar, but we didn't have a lot of money. And so as we went through college and got out, it was really important for me, just because my mom and dad, I guess, kind of beat it into me that to be anti-debt, to get out of debt quickly. Yep. And for my wife, she was on board because she just wanted a different way of life. So what we did is she graduated 1 year ahead of me, and so she was making a entry level salary of mid $30,000,
Yeah.
and I was still in grad school and I was working, making maybe $10 or $12 an hour, and we just kind of agreed to live off of whatever she was making, and then I was helping get her out of student loan debt and a car loan with everything I made. And by the time I made my first or second like professional paycheck, we were completely debt free and we were pretty happy living off of her salary. And so we just thought, why not continue? So we continued to live off of her salary and we used mine to save for a down payment on a house. And then eventually we started rolling that into investments. And really for 15 years, we lived off of one salary and we completely saved one. And that's kind of how we got to where we were in position to be able to at least be thinking about retirement by like our late 30s, early 40s.
Oh, so you started really at the start of your career, so like in your early 20s, like 22, 23, something like that.
Yep. Yeah. For my wife, she graduated with a bachelor's. So she was probably like 21, 22. And
Okay.
I had a master's. So I was like 23, 24. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of impressive because when you're that age, at least I remember when I was that age, it's I mean, either you're a student still or you start your career. But then when you have your first salary, I mean, what you think about is, yeah, I can now spend my money. It's my money, and then you already started to think about, yeah, putting it to good use, putting your money to good use, and as well having this idea of we will save one income and we will spend one income.
Yeah. And I certainly remember like my best friend in physical therapy school. The first thing he did is went out and bought a big brand new pickup truck and he was really proud of it. And
Yeah,
another girl who we were good friends with, she went out and bought an Audi and was really proud of it. And like honestly, I don't know what made us go so against the grain. Other than I honestly think like I think a lot of people think you have to come from money to become wealthy or even
yeah.
consider something what we're doing. Which I don't really consider us super wealthy, but compared to the world, I guess we are. But yeah, like I think it was really just security for us, and I think that was
Yeah.
growing up without a ton of wealth and resources and travel and all these things. It actually kind of made it, I think, easier for us because we were living at least as good as we lived growing up, and we just valued that security more than we valued the fancy car or the most expensive house we could afford.
Yes, indeed, and it makes sense from a psychological point of view. But then as well, how do you find this recipe? I mean, how do you think about? Yeah, I'm gonna save one half. I think okay, it's gonna be explained. But then, how do you live in your area? I mean, you mentioned Pennsylvania. I don't know if that's where you were when you were a young couple. Was it affordable to live there? I mean, I don't know the cost of living in general. Was it possible to live on this salary, on this one salary?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we, in some ways, like you mentioned, like our life was kind of unconventional, but in a lot of ways, it was actually fairly conventional in that
Hmm.
we went and we bought a house shortly after we were married, which is, I think, what most people do.
Yeah.
But like what most people do, at least in the States, like you tend to meet with a real estate agent, and they'll have you go to a bank and you get pre-approved, and they say, okay, you can afford X dollars a month of mortgage payment, and then they kind of back into by that you can afford X dollar of house, and then magically the agent starts taking you to the houses that are in that range. And we kind of said like like this is what we want to spend, like this is what we're comfortable, and we just bought I guess much less house than you could quote
Hmm.
unquote afford. And we were in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was where we bought our first house, and it's a major city, like has major league sport teams and everything, but it's on the lower end for big cities as far as costs. So it was more affordable than say San Francisco or New York City, but it also was not like some backwoods place with super ultra cheap living by any
Hmm.
means.
And okay, so then on the big expenses like the house, you went far below. Let's say no, I mean not far below, but you went below your means, what you could afford actually. So that's
Mhm.
a one really big move. But then in your daily life, how is that translated? Do you also save here and there, go to the cheapest supermarkets, or did you travel less? What did you do to as well save money there?
No, so I think so. Housing was, if you at least in the states, that's most people's biggest expense, and then the
Hmm.
second is transportation, cars primarily.
Yeah.
And again, we kind of just we had old kind of crappy cars, but they worked, they ran, and so we didn't go out and buy new cars. And we've never really had a car payment since we've been married. My wife had a car payment when we were that was one of the things, the debts we had to get out of. But since that point, we've never had a car payment. And so really we focused on those biggest expenses of housing
Hmm.
and cars. And I don't like, it's kind of funny. We were introduced because we met through a Facebook group, and you said you were looking for stories of frugality. And where I think my story is kind of interesting is, yeah, we've lived off of one income, but like we've actually lived a pretty amazing lifestyle. A, because we got those big expenses so right that
Hmm.
we didn't really worry about the little things. Like we weren't clipping coupons, we weren't
Okay.
skipping vacations, stuff like that. And then the other part of it is because we locked in those expenses, like particularly housing, like once you have a 30-year mortgage and with a fixed rate, that's a fixed expense. And then we grew both of our salaries. So we started in the mid 30s, but we grew where we were both maxing out around 80 or 90,000. So we were able
Hmm.
to, as we still lived on one salary, we were still able to inflate our lifestyle pretty nicely. And then we were saving even more money on top of that. So it worked out really nice by getting it right from the very beginning and locking in those expenses.
That's kind of cool and impressive. But yeah, you if you look in that mortgage early, then yeah, it's very easy. I mean, it sounds easy. So, but then of course, what we say usually, I mean, if you talk with people in the personal finance space, you can save as much as you want, but then of course you need your money to work for you. So, what money moves did you make in the when talking about investments, Chris?
So, as smart as I probably sound up to this point for getting all these big decisions so right, I'm going to sound really stupid next. But
Ah.
we kind of bought in like hook, line, and sinker into the idea that investing is difficult and tax planning
Hmm.
is difficult, and you need to hire a professional to help you. So, basically, I kind of mentioned like my parents, they didn't probably combined, they made as much as either my wife or I made. So,
Okay.
and they did well. They were able to help my brother and I through college. They were able to retire securely. So we assumed like they must have a financial advisor that really knows what he's doing. And so we asked them who they used, and we went to him, and that was the extent of the questions we asked. And in retrospect, 15 years later, after making a lot of mistakes, we found out that they did really well in spite of their advisor, because my mom was very frugal, and they were just very smart in other ways with their money. But we made a lot of investing mistakes, and that's really what kind of got me into writing about this topic. Is I kind of felt like I had a gift in that I would be able to help other people, because as I talk to people, I realized most people feel overwhelmed by investing.
Hmm.
And as I kind of got into it, I could really relate to that, because I did not get everything right at all when it came to investing and tax planning. I made a lot of mistakes. And
Hmm.
so I found that that was very helpful as I was able to teach other people and make it accessible to them.
Yeah, and can you share a few examples of the errors you made and a few common errors maybe that you help your audience with?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is in investing, if you read the work of John Bogle, who founded Vanguard, which is a very big advisory, a big investment firm that really focuses on the clients first. And he's actually by some people called like Saint Jack. And there's a website called the Bogle Heads of just people that are just so loyal to him. And
Hmm.
because he's done so much for the average investor. But he really emphasizes that costs are the one of the very few things that you can control as an investor. And when you're going to a investment advisor, those costs are that's how they make their living. And so your interests are to have your costs as low as possible.
Hmm.
Their interest is to make the costs as high as possible, without making it so obvious and blatant that you're going to leave. So we had very high cost investments.
Okay.
One of the simplest things you can do in the States is you use, we have like retirement accounts tied to our work, and it gives you a nice tax benefit. And also, again, going back to cost, we had much cheaper options. And the advisor told us to bypass those and invest with him because he could get us these quote unquote better options through him, which again were better for him. They paid him a lot more, but they were not very good for us. And so, like when we unwound it all, we realized we were paying about almost $10,000 in fees, and
Whoa.
we had no idea what we were paying. I thought it
Yeah.
was maybe, if you asked me to guess high end, I would have guessed maybe $1,000. I had no idea.
Hmm.
And then on top of that, we were paying about $10,000 in unnecessary income taxes. And then because we weren't using those tax sheltered accounts, also taxes on our investments. So we were had a drag of about $20,000 a year, which sounds ridiculous, but I promise you it's true, and I have it all broken down in a blog post. But yeah, it was pretty bad advice that we followed, and we made some big mistakes. And it wasn't like a one time thing. I'm talking like a decade plus of this till we kind of got wise to it and figured it out.
Hmm. And so then what was your inspiration or where did you find information to get that investment part? Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think as we kind of were living this frugal lifestyle, and one of the things that kind of kept us on that path is we kind of got into the outdoor community. And so like there's this idea of like being ski bums or dirt bags, which is kind of an affectionate name for climbers. And so we were just kind of winging it and saving a lot of money. And we were going to kind of switch our lifestyle and move west. Probably this was 2016 or 17,
Yeah.
and just kind of wing it, cut back, maybe work part time, maybe get jobs at a ski resort or something. And then we found out we didn't think we could have kids, and we found out my wife was pregnant, and that kind of was the light bulb that changed everything. Because instead of just winging it, and the two of us we could figure it out. Now we had another life we were responsible for, and so I was like, man, I need to get serious. And so I started like looking into like financial planning and getting serious, and could we actually retire or do something to change our lifestyle. And that's when I kind of stumbled upon the FIRE community, again, financial independence, retire early. And those blogs really changed my life. And that kind of inspired me to start writing and sharing my story as well.
And then you mentioned FIRE. And then how did you know, or how do you know that you can retire? Because this is 2016. Now we're 5 years later, and I think you retired in 2017. So how can you know that you can retire? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, so for us, I think so. I mentioned that I started blogging to kind of share my experience. So my original blog was called "Eat the Financial Elephant," and the meaning behind that, not a very catchy name if you want people to find your blog, because nobody's looking for that. But there was a riddle. I was at work as a physical therapist, and this one woman had her unruly grandchild, and so I was reading these riddles in Highlights, which is this kids magazine here in the States, and it was, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. And it kind of like that just took me back, because I was overwhelmed by personal finance. I had no idea what I was doing. And so Eat the Financial Elephant was just my journey to kind of figure this stuff out. And then I mentioned in the intro that I blog at Can I Retire Yet? And I literally found that blog like as I started getting serious about FIRE and early retirement, and I was asking, can I retire yet? I was literally asking that question.
Yeah.
And I Googled it one day and I found the blog. And I thought that was kind of the answer. And what I kind of later realized is, I think it's good to be in a position where you have financial independence and you probably could live forever off of your assets. But what I ultimately determined is like retirement comes with a lot of trade-offs. So I mentioned that we didn't save because we had this great plan. We weren't sacrificing. We did it because it felt good. So now we get to the idea of retirement, where you're drawing down your assets that you work so hard to save. And for both of us, it was terrifying. And I mentioned like my wife grew up without having much financial security, and especially for her. And so it kind of got us really thinking. So when we say I'm retired, and some people call it and say you're like not quote unquote like really retired, and I really don't care about that. But like right now, I work from home. I write the blog. I've written a book. So I make a bit of income from that, but like I have basically complete time freedom. We live in the mountains. We do the things we want to do. We have time for our daughter. My wife works part-time. She works remotely from a company in Washington, D.C. on the eastern part of the States. Like I said, we're in Utah in the western states. So again, she has just a ton of freedom over her schedule and works remotely. And so that's kind of what we do now. And so our assets are actually growing in quote unquote retirement. And I think we have a lot of fulfillment, and we're still serving people and connecting with people. But we actually have that retired lifestyle that we were looking for. So we kind of have the best of all worlds.
But you don't do anymore the physical therapy.
No, I definitely did retire from that career. Like
okay.
I left my job in 2017, and I was kind of wanted to leave that door open just in case I would miss it. And I can't say I missed it at all. So after keeping up my continuing education and stuff, I let it go at the end of 2020. So yeah, I've not worked for 3 years, and I've officially retired, I guess, because I don't even have a license anymore as of 3 or 4 months ago.
And then of course now you have all that freedom, and it's great, and you contribute to the website, and as well I think you wrote a book. We'll talk about it later. But then I'm wondering as well, because I read one of your posts, and then in that blog it's talking about it's a 5-year-old post. But then you mentioned about as well making the right choices with your big expenses. But as well, you mentioned something about the lifestyle, and that you don't give gifts at Christmas and for birthday. Is that still applicable?
Well, we have an 8-year-old child, and I think that would not pass very well. So we definitely give her gifts, and like we help her like make gifts. But yeah, like my wife and I, we just I don't know. Like we, again, like you kind of asked, like, is there a lot of sacrifice? Are we scrimping here and there? And we kind of have the things that we want. And we really, I guess we don't feel like we want for anything. So, I would say if we give gifts, we would tend to maybe like do a trip together and call that a gift, or maybe like something sentimental or something like that. But yeah, we're definitely not. Yeah, we really don't exchange gifts for birthdays and Christmas and things like that. No.
Okay, and for example, going out to the restaurant, it's a pleasure of mine. I mean, discovering a new dish, discovering,
Mm-hmm.
trying new stuff, even a good wine. Um, is that something that is part of your lifestyle, or totally no? I don't do it. It will slow down my path to FI, or is it?
Now we're big foodies.
Okay, cool.
My wife has like a gluten allergy, and so a lot of times it's easier to cook at home. But I mean, we eat mostly organic, very low grain diet. So no, we spend a lot on food, and when we do go out, we don't tend to go to like the chain restaurants or fast food. We'll definitely, it's more like a splurge. It's more for the experience. So yeah, we do
Yeah,
like to eat out, but we don't do it often, just because in a lot of ways it's just kind of easier to do things at home.
yeah, indeed, indeed. And I mean, I don't go every day neither. Right? It's once in a while I like to do that, but I know that in the FI community, sometimes it's all this going out and stuff. It's a bit like, oh no, you should reduce, you should do this, and you should do that. So yeah, I wanted to ask you because as I saw this a bit shocking a remark on the birthday gift. So I was like, oh come on, that's a bit that's a
Yeah,
bit
so
tough.
no, so there is this kind of perception of the fire
Hmm.
community that it's like this ultra frugality,
Yeah.
and we don't spend money. And so in the book, we mentioned the book, and it's called Choose FI, and it's based
Hmm.
on there's a podcast of that name, FI being financial independence again. And so in the what my idea was for the book was to take all these different people that influenced and helped me, and to put together like the best lessons from everybody, so that somebody could create their own path. And then as I was contemplating this, two other guys, they started this podcast. And so I reached out to them and we decided to do it. But in going through and that's what the basis of the book is.
Yeah.
And in going through their episodes, it was actually not anybody who blogs or really writes about this, but it was a listener of the podcast. And he shared this idea of what he called being a valuist. And it really resonated with me. And then we kind of made it a focal point in the book. And so basically, how we kind of describe it is instead of being frugal for the sake of frugality,
Yeah.
really kind of be relentless with kind of evaluating your spending decisions, and the things that don't bring you value, then yeah, just cut them.
Yeah.
And so like
Indeed.
again, for
Yeah.
my wife and I, like gifts are one of those things, cars are one of those things, but I don't really judge somebody if a car is your thing. Yeah, go buy a car.
Yeah.
Like for us, travel was our thing. And so on the way to financial independence, I mean, we got into high altitude mountaineering. We climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and we did an African safari. We were to South America. We climbed 20,000-foot mountains down there. We've been all over the States. We've been to Australia. So like for us, travel was our thing. So we definitely splurge. Like I said, food, we're kind of foodies. We'll spend
Hmm.
money on that. But then other stuff, if you look at the way I dress, you probably think I'm a bum. If you look at my car, you would not be envious. Like, so there's certain things and like the stuff that I don't care about. Yeah, I mean, I think we look really frugal in some areas, but
Hmm.
then in other areas, yeah, I would say we definitely do not fit that ultra frugal fire stereotype at all.
I really like this balance because it's about being intentional, actually, Chris. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key. So that valueless concept, I really loved it and kind of latched onto it. And that's kind of, I think, the best way to explain it.
And then, of course, for the listeners, some people are in their corporate job, like myself. Some people are entrepreneurs, but everybody's at different stages in their life. And when I hear such a story, and maybe it will remind yourself when you heard first about retiring early. People may be a bit skeptical, which I guess you hear a lot. So is it possible for anybody, let's say 25 years old, 35 years old, to really start this journey? I mean, can everybody really achieve financial independence according to you?
I'm going to answer that kind of in a roundabout way because it's kind of I think anybody can. I don't know
Hmm.
that everybody can because it takes a certain mindset and a certain willingness.
Yeah.
I mentioned like kind of the reason I wanted to share my story is just because we didn't have this master plan. I did feel overwhelmed for a long time, and I think it's relatable.
Hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with the story of a guy named Roger Bannister. He was the first person ever to run a 4-minute mile. And prior to him, it was considered like that was like the limits of human capacity. Like it was not possible to run a mile in less than 4 minutes.
Hmm.
And it's pretty remarkable. This was like in the, I think, 1950s when he broke that. And prior to that, it was impossible. It was not a human, something achievable by a human. Within 6 or 8 months, two other guys also broke it. And
Okay.
then since then, thousands of people have done it. Like if you watch the Olympics this summer, I'll promise you, you'll see the 4 minute mile broken. I think it's been broken by like a 50-year-old. It's been broken in a high school meet. And so I kind of really liken physical therapy to that. Like I don't think anybody can run a 4 minute mile. I know I can't. So I won't say everybody can do it, but it's possible because Roger Bannister broke that barrier and he showed people it's possible.
Mhm.
And I really think that's what kind of us in the fire community are doing is we're just normal people and we're showing it's possible. And hopefully somebody listening to this will kind of, it'll spark them and say, well, if this guy can do it, like obviously he had no idea what he was doing with investing. Obviously he kind of stumbled into the stuff with saving
Mhm.
because of security. Why can't I do it? And that's my hope is that it's going to make people think and show them that it's possible. And so, yeah, I think it's possible for anybody, but it's not possible for everybody because not everybody's going to do the things that it takes.
Mhm. No, I understand. And really, the mindset thing is really important. It's something we have talked about in previous episodes here as well. And then, do you have any advice or like 2, 3 actionable tips that people listening can try if they want to achieve early retirement or at least get more advanced with their finances?
Yeah, I mean, I think the absolute first step everybody should take,
Hmm.
and I kind of hate one size fits all advice, but I think this really works, is you have to be honest with yourself and you have to know where your money is going. And so I think for a lot of people, it's like stepping on a scale when you know you need to lose weight, but it's like there's so much judgment that goes into that, and there's
Yeah.
so much just dread of seeing that number. But if you don't know where you're starting and you're not honest with yourself, it's really hard to make improvements. And it's very similar with your finances. So whether it means you get some type of an app, whether that means you just write on a pen and paper or make a spreadsheet. But I think it's important to kind of track where every dollar goes. That's going to allow you to improve. And then this is kind of something that I got from the fire movement that it's really blatantly obvious once you hear it, but until you hear it, it never occurred to me. But like a lot of people say, how much money do you need to retire? And it's based on what you earn.
Yeah.
And they'll say like you need 80% of your income or 90% of your income. You need to be able to replace that. And it really, if you just step back and think about it logically, it makes no sense. Like if you're a physician earning $400,000 a year and you have a twin brother who's a garbage man making $40,000 a year, but you grew up the same and you have the same interest and you like to do the same thing, why would that doctor need 10 times more than the garbage man? It just makes no sense.
Hmm.
But that's the way people approach it because that's what people say. And, the quote unquote they say. And so whoever they are, say you need 90% or 80% of your income. So it all comes down to what you need to retire, what you need to be financially independent is based on what you spend, what you want your lifestyle to look like. And so for all those reasons, I think you have to start with knowing what your spending is now. And then just kind of, again, just go through without judgment and just say, do I really value these things I'm spending on? Do I want to cut them? Maybe I want to spend more on some of these areas because they bring me a lot of joy and I'm
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm shortchanging myself in those areas. But that's where I think you should start.
No, these are excellent, and I can agree to it. And it's yeah, you made a good example with the weight scale. I think that's an example that really hits home because then you after the Christmas holidays, maybe some people, including me, it's not always pleasant to go and step on it. So yeah, it's this reality check first, and then you can maybe move on further to accept it and make the right moves.
Yeah, and again, my background is as a physical therapist, and there's so many parallels between physical health and financial health, and just from the psychological aspects, the things that kind of overwhelm people that really shouldn't once you take the time, the things that people think are so difficult, and if you just do the basic, simple things right, there's just so many parallels like that. Yeah, so I like to use a lot of those type of analogies.
Okay, very good. And so, Chris, you're freshly retired, and okay, now you're still young and active. But what's in store for you? I mean, you still have quite half of your life to live. So, what will you do with all this free time, Chris? Do you have any big projects coming up, or anything on a bucket list that you want to achieve?
Yeah, so I started reading these fire blogs and retirement blogs in general,
Hmm.
and a lot of them, like the really common advice is, you should retire. You shouldn't retire from something. You need to retire to something.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think in general, that's good advice. But I think I took it to I took it to a maximum extreme. Like so I left my job on December 1st of 2017. That was a Friday. On Monday, December 4th, I started working on my book. A month later, I started working on this new blog. 5 months later, we moved across the country. So in between there, we were cleaning out our house, selling everything we owned, getting rid of the house where we lived for 15 years and all the emotions and memories that go with that.
Hmm.
And then we moved the whole way across the country and making a whole new set of friends and social network. And I think I kind of took on a little bit too much too quickly. And I kind of struggle with the transition. So
Okay.
now I'm just kind of slowing down a little bit. We're actually we're really going to kind of, for the first time ever, leverage this lifestyle. With COVID, we haven't seen our family on the other side of the country for a long time. So we're renting a camper van. We're taking about 8 or 9 days to drive across the country. We're going to spend over 2 weeks with our family. We'll take 8 or 9 days coming back, and we're just kind of blocking off the next month. And once we get back, I'll be working on the blog, and that's kind of taking a lot of my focus, and just still focusing on being a dad and just getting out and adventuring and kind of taking life as it comes at us.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, Chris, thank you very much for this sharing your story and this advice. I think it's very good, and yeah, I'm excited to share this with the listeners. So, Chris, as you may know, we always have our 3 quick fire questions before we close the show. So, are you ready?
I am ready, I think.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, Chris, question number 1 is: what is your best investment so far?
For us, it's absolutely been our education. So my wife and I, we both ended up having 3 college degrees, and we did that with very minimal debt because we were very intentional about how we got
Hmm.
them and how we were going to pay for them. And then even beyond the formal degrees, like I said, like once we realized the mistakes we were making with our investments, I just probably spent about 3 to 6 months and just read every book I could, every blog I could, and kind of dove into that and took control of our investments. And that's, again, we kind of mentioned, but probably saves us ten or $20,000 a year. And then just learning to blog, developing new skills, and the relationships that come with it. I mean, I think we're just lifelong learners, and so I think that that's something that's by far been our best investment. It's paid many times with any money or time that we've put into it.
Yeah, sure, sure. That's yeah, education always pays off in a way or another, so that's good. And then talking about, you read a lot of blogs, but books you mentioned. So number 2 is, what is the best book you can recommend to anyone? It does not need to be a financial book, but yeah, please. What is the book you say? Read this.
Yeah, I read really widely, and that was a tough question because there's so many good books. But I think the 2 that I go back to, and actually, it's actually funny. I just requested one of these for our trip, but the 2 are Viktor Frankl's *Man's Search for Meaning*, and
Hmm.
there's a book by a woman named Byron Katie called *Loving What Is*. And the thing that they have in common, they're very different books, very different people, but the thing that they have in common is just kind of acknowledging that there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen to you in life that you have zero control over, but you can control your response to it.
Hmm.
And I think the reason I return to those books and I read at least one of them every year, and sometimes both of them in a year, is I certainly need that reminder for myself. And I think most people do. So I think those are just great books about making the best of whatever life is throwing at you at that moment, and knowing that you can't always control what happens, but you can control your response to it.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I'll look it up myself. I didn't hear of these books, so I'll look it up and link it in the show notes. And then last question is, what is a purchase you can recommend for under $100?
Um, so I mentioned I'm a big book nerd, and that's probably the easy answer. But I'll say, like, since we moved here to Utah, so we grew up in our daughter, we had her and we're starting to raise her in Pennsylvania, where there is hills, and then we came out to Utah where there is big mountains. And when she started trying to ski out here, she was just totally intimidated. And again, one of our non-frugal habits, we're big skiers, and we kind of got her into it, I think, from when she was 2 years old.
Hmm.
And so we put her in after school lessons, and it was, I think it was about $100, and probably a little bit less for like 4 lessons. And man, getting out there with somebody who's not mom and dad, who you'll actually listen to, it just got her mojo and her confidence back. And we just had such a good season after that. And then since then, she tears up the mountain, and she's 8 now and absolutely loves it. So yeah, I think like purchases like that, where you're investing in something that's going to allow you to really enjoy the things that you like to enjoy and have her enjoy them versus dragging her to the mountain. That was a
Yeah.
huge and great investment for us.
Oh, perfect. If she loves it, even better. Awesome.
Yes, yes, she does now.
Excellent. So, well, Chris, thank you again. And then where can the listeners find you? You mentioned, of course, your blog, Can I Retire Yet? You wrote a book yet. Tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, so my home on the internet is the blog Can I Retire Yet? It's caniretireyet.com. And I have a contact on there. I actually like connecting with readers and listeners. And so feel free to reach out to me there. And my book is called Choose FI, Your Blueprint to Financial Independence. And again, that was written in partnership with the guys who do the Choose FI podcast. And we just feature a lot of people who have done something similar to what I've done as far as being able to achieve financial independence quickly. And we kind of condensed it down into the principles that allow you to pick and choose what's worked for other people so you can create your own path to financial independence. And you can find that on Amazon or anywhere you would buy books.
Yeah, very good. And I visited your website, and there's a lot of information out there. So no, it's very complete, and there's a few calculators and tools that you can use as well to calculate your path to financial independence, retirement. Really, a lot of interesting articles on retirement, investing in real estate, etc.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the kind word, and thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Okay, see you, Chris.
All right, take care now.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you learned something from it. And if you found it useful, please make sure you share it with a friend, or you can also rate the show in your favorite podcast app. This will help the show to grow. So if you do so, thank you very much. And now let's go through the key takeaways for today. Number 1, it is normal to be skeptical, but early retirement is possible if you have a regular job. You do not have to come from money. You will need to go against the grain and make unconventional choices. For example, living on one salary and saving the other one. Buy less house than you can afford. Define what you want to spend. You do not need to take on the full mortgage you're allowed to by your banker. Transportation. Chris and his wife were driving crappy cars and kept the car payments low. This may be for you or not, but anyway, that's a way to achieve it because this is a big expense. And talking about this big expenses, focus on getting those right early on, and then you can worry less about the little things. Number 2, on investing, control your costs. Number 3, be a valuist. You do not need to be ultimately frugal in everything. You can focus on purchasing the things that bring value to you, and then you forget the rest. Number 4, anybody can achieve early retirement. Not everybody will. It takes a certain mindset and willingness. As Chris mentioned during the episode, we are normal people. It is possible. If this guy can do it, why can't I do it? That's the whole point of this conversation. And then number 5, how to retire early. The first step is to be honest with yourself and see where your money is going. So really make the effort of looking at your expenses and track them. Number 2, figure out how much you need to retire. And it is not as simple as 80% of your income as they say. So think about what you want your lifestyle to be, and this will help you define what you need exactly. And then, of course, there's one big question that you need to ask yourself, because you can decide to retire from your job or whatever, but you need to as well think about what do you want to retire to, and that is key. So that was it for today. Thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot to me. Make sure you subscribe in Apple Podcast. And of course, please do not hesitate to contact me. If you have any questions or feedback, send me an email, john@johnnytalks.com, or connect through social media at Johnny Talks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And amigos, once more, thanks so much for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.